the Coelum Philosophorum, alchemy, and what opinion should be formed thereof, regulated by the 7 rules or fundamental canons according to the 7, commonly known metals, and containing a preface, with certain treatises and appendices. Preface to the English translation. There are many respects in which Paracelsus at the present day seems to be little more than a name. Even among professed mystics, the knowledge concerning him, very meager and very indefinite, is knowledge that has been obtained at second hand, in most cases from Eliphas Levi, who in his Dogme et Retour de la Haute Magie, and again in his Histoire de la Magie, has delivered an intuitive judgment upon the German monarch of arcana, expressed epigrammatically, after the best manner of a Frenchman. But whencesoever derived, the knowledge is thin and phantasmal. Paracelsus is indeed cited as an authority in occult science, as a great alchemist, a great magician, a great doctor. He is somehow supposed to be standing evidence of the wisdom of a spoliated past, and to offer peculiar instance of malignity on the part of the enemies of Hermetic philosophy, because such persons have presumed to pronounce him an impostor. Thus there is a very strong opinion concerning him, which occultists and mystics of all schools have derived from a species of mystical tradition, and this represents one side of modern thought concerning him. It is not altogether a satisfactory side, because it is not obtained at first hand. In this respect, however, it may compare, without suffering by comparison, with the alternative opinion which obtains among non-mystics, namely that Paracelsus was a great charlatan, though at the same time it is true that he was a great physician, at least for the period in which he lived. This judgment, as little, perhaps less than the other, is derived from any solid knowledge concerning the man or his writings. At the same time, it is noticeable that even hearsay condemnations admit that Paracelsus performed notable cures. How it comes about that the application of what would be termed a distracted theory both in medicine and physics enabled its inventor to astound his age by what seemed miracles of the healing art would be a crux for such criticism, if the criticism knew anything about it. It is not a crux for the mystics, because by these it would be replied that Paracelsus was a veritable adept, that his Hermetic teachings require to be interpreted, and that the key to their meaning would lay open for those who possess it an abundant treasure of sapience to which the literal significance is only a bizarre veil. Between these views, it is unnecessary to make choice here. It is proposed to enable those who are interested in either to judge this matter for themselves by placing completely before them, for the first time, and in an English dress, the Hermetic writings of Paracelsus. It is proposed also, by way of a brief introduction, to notify a few facts in connection with the life of the author which may be useful at the beginning of an inquiry. There are, however, many debatable points in connection with the life of Paracelsus to which a reference in this place scarcely requires to be made. What proportion of his long designation belonged to him by birth or baptism? To what countries he actually extended his travels during incessant wanderings which terminated only with his life? Under what circumstances he died? And what was the precise manner of his death? All these are points about which there is considerable uncertainty, and they are at this day not likely to be settled. Theophrastus and Bombast seem to have been assumed names to one of, describes himself as a Helvetian and a German. He was born in the year 1493, following the tradition which is most generally accepted, but other dates have been indicated, the earliest being 1490. According to one account, he was descended from the ancient and honorable family of Bombast, which had abode during many generations at the castle of Hohenheim near Stuttgart-Rottenburg, but this is most probably romancing. His father was a physician of repute, who is said to have been in possession of a large collection of curious books, and has also been described as a Grand Master of the Teutonic Order. But the precise meaning attaching to this high-sounding dignity is uncertain, and the authority is suspicious. His mother is variously identified as the matron of a hospital and superintendent of the University of Einsiedeln. Paracelsus is reputed to have been their only child, born 1 year after marriage, but it has also been hinted that his parents were not married, and that the great master of Hermetic medicine was a natural son. He is said also to have been emasculated in his childhood, but there is reason to suppose that this was merely a hypothetical explanation to account for his beardless and somewhat feminine appearance, and for that hatred of women which seems to have been one of his social characteristics, and can be traced indirectly, but with sufficient distinctness, in his writings. About 1502, the family removed to Carinthia, and there the father continued to practice medicine till his death in 1534. From him, Paracelsus is supposed to have received the first rudiments of education, and he entered the University of Basel at the age of 16, when he betook himself to the study of alchemy, surgery, and medicine. To the first of these sciences he had previously had some introduction through the works of Isaac the Hollander, which are said to have inflamed him with the ambition of curing diseases by medicine superior to the materia at that time in use. It was from the same source that he derived the cardinal principle which is enunciated everywhere in his writings, namely that salt, sulfur, and mercury are the three elementary constituents of all substances. This doctrine, however, by no means originated with the first alchemist of Holland, and Isaac himself was a follower of Geber Morien and Arnold. The actual initiation of Paracelsus into the mysteries of alchemy is, however, supposed to have been attained under the tuition of the abbot Trithemius, who was regarded as an adept of a high order and had been previously the instructor of the more celebrated, though less illustrious, Henry Cornelius Agrippa. From this mysterious ecclesiastic, who at the present day, insofar as he is remembered at all, is best known by his treatises on cryptic writing, he is supposed to have acquired the Kabbalah of the spiritual, astral, and material worlds. About 1516, he is still found at Basel pursuing his researches in mineralogy, medicine, surgery, and chemistry under the guidance of Sigismund Fugger, a wealthy physician of that city. Subsequently, having got into some trouble with the authorities, he fled and commenced his nomadic life, which an apparently inaccurate tradition represents to have begun at the age of 20 years. Though his father was still alive, he appears to have been without any means of subsistence, and supported himself, like many distressed students of that period, by psalm-singing astrological predictions, chiromantic soothsaying, and it is even said by necromantic practices. He wandered through Germany, Hungary, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, and Russia. In the last mentioned country, if it be true that he ever reached it, he is reported to have been made prisoner by the Tartars, to have been brought before the great Cham, to have become a favorite at the court of that potentate, and to have accompanied his son on an embassy from China to Constantinople. In spite of the tuition of Trithemius, he had apparently something to learn, and that was nothing less than the supreme secret of alchemistry, the universal dissolvent, the azoth, alkaste, or sophic fire. This was imparted to him by a generous Arabian about whom no other particulars are forthcoming. It is easy to see that the greater part of this nomadic legend is purely fabulous, and so also in all probability is his subsequent journey to India and Egypt. It is not an unusual device to account for obscure periods in the lives of Hermetic philosophers by extensive Eastern travelings. However this may be, Paracelsus ultimately returned to Europe and passed along the Danube into Italy, where he appears as an army surgeon, and where also his wonderful cures began. He is said to have re-entered Germany in 1526, at the age of 32, and if this be accepted, the date 1516. When he is supposed to have been at work with Sigismund Fugger will be found approximately correct. It is to the period immediately succeeding his return that most of his biographers assign his induction into a professorship of physics, medicine, and surgery at the university he entered as a youth. This was a position of some importance, and it was offered him at the instance of Erasmus and Ecolampidus. There, in his lectures, he professed internal medicine, denounced the antiquated systems of Galen and other authorities, and began his instruction by burning the works of these masters in a brass pan with sulfur and nitre. He created innumerable enemies by his arrogance and his innovations, but the value of his mineral medicines was proved by the cures which he performed. These cures only increased the hatred of his persecutors, and Paracelsus, with characteristic defiance, invited the faculty to a lecture in which he promised to teach the greatest secret of medicine. He began by uncovering a dish which contained excrement. The doctors, indignant at the insult, departed precipitately. Paracelsus shouting after them, "If you will not hear the mysteries of putrefactive fermentation, you are unworthy of the name of physicians." It will be easily understood that the Hermetic doctor did not long retain his professorship at Basel. He came into conflict with the municipal authorities, and a second time he was forced to flee the place. He betook himself once more to a wandering mode of life. In 1528, he proceeded to Colmar. In 1530, he is found at Nuremberg, in embroilment, as usual, with the medical faculty, by whom he was denounced as an impostor, but the tables were turned on his opponents after his successful treatment of several aggravated cases of elephantiasis. For the 10 years succeeding this date, there are no certain records of his movements. He commonly lodged at inns and other public places, still performing cures which were astonishing for the period, and, according to the accusations of his enemies, also drinking to excess. The testimony of Operinus on this point is very clear, though it has been indignantly repudiated by some of his later defenders. In 1541, Paracelsus was invited by Archbishop Ernst to settle at Salzburg, and there, according to one account, he died on September 24 of the same year. But the manner of his death, like that of his birth, has been the subject of contradictory recitals. By an alternative statement, it occurred on a bench at the kitchen fire in a Strasbourg hostelry. One writer supposes the event to have been accelerated by a scuffle with assassins in the pay of the Orthodox medical faculty. There can be no doubt that Paracelsus obtained a wide, though not altogether happy, reputation during the brief period of his turbulent life, and there is also no doubt that this was immeasurably increased after death. It is in no sense inexact to affirm that he founded a new school both in medicine and in alchemy. The commentaries on his medical system became a literature which, in extent at least, is formidable. Out of the mystic physics of his alchemical teachings, the Rosicrucian doctrines developed in the first part of the following century. The works of Benedictus Figulus are evidence that he was idolized by his disciples. He was termed the noble and beloved monarch, the German Hermes, the philosopher Trismegistus, our dear preceptor and king of arts, Theophrastus of blessed memory and immortal fame. The collection of his genuine writings was made with devout care, and as a consequence of his celebrity, many fictitious treatises were in due course ascribed to him. Students attracted by his doctrines traveled far in search of like-minded persons to compare observations thereon and to sift the mystery of his instruction. In the course of these inquiries, it seems to have become evident from the experience of his followers that his prescriptions in many cases were not to be literally understood, even when they were apparently the ordinary formal and concerned with the known materia of medicine. It will scarcely be necessary to add that in things alchemical, the letter of his teachings was found still more in need of interpretation. The very curious influence exercised by Paracelsus for something like 200 years over certain sections of restless experiment and speculation is still unwritten, and it would be interesting to trace here, were it possible, within the limits of a preface. A task so ambitious is, however, outside those limits, and will perhaps be more wisely surrendered to other hands, for it is in the main part of the history of medicine, and demands an expert in the medical literature and medical knowledge of the past. The translations which follow are concerned only with the Hermetic writings of Paracelsus, to the exclusion of many formidable treatises on surgical science and on the causes and cure of disease. They comprise what Paracelsus would himself have comprised in a collection of his alchemical writings, and this in itself is much more than is ordinarily understood to be within the significance of the term. With Paracelsus, the province of alchemy was not limited to the transmutation of metals. It was, broadly speaking, the development of hidden possibilities or virtues in any substance, whether by God or man or nature. Thus it included the philosophy of creation and dealt with the first matter as developed into the universe by divine power. It included also the natural evolution which takes place around us, whether in the formation of metals within the earth or the formation of animals in the matrix. Finally, it included the development by man's skill and art of whatsoever was capable of improvement in the products of nature. Thus, the Hermetic and alchemical writings of Paracelsus have a wider scope than might at first be inferred from the title. The purpose of this translation is altogether of an unpretentious kind. It aims at providing, and that for the first time, a complete and faithful text of all that Paracelsus is known or supposed to have written on the subject of alchemy and Hermetic medicine. It does not attempt to distinguish between the works which have been falsely attributed to him. Concerning this question, there are no satisfactory canons of criticism. For those which have been indicated by the old author of the Onomasticon are of an arbitrary and unpractical kind. A careful reader will probably regard with suspicion the aurora of the philosophers, at least in its present state, and he will possibly reject altogether the treatise concerning the spirits of the planets. There is nothing else in these volumes except the uncertain manual, which from internal evidence is unlikely to have been the work of Paracelsus. And it is unnecessary to enter into the question which has been raised by some of his biographers as to his employment of scribes under him, who reduced his dictations to writing and have possibly maltreated their master. The text which has been adopted for translation is the Geneva Folio in 4 volumes 1658 in Latin. The bizarre mixture of Latin and Old German in which Paracelsus originally wrote presents many difficulties with which it is unnecessary to grapple, as the Latin collected edition appears to represent in a very satisfactory manner both the letter and the spirit of the originals. It seems also desirable to state that a comparison of the medical and chemical knowledge possessed by Paracelsus with the chemistry and medicine of today is outside the purpose of this edition, because it is outside possibility within the limits of 2 volumes. There is no doubt that it would be an interesting as well as an important task to establish the exact position of Paracelsus, not only as regards modern knowledge, but as regards the science which preceded him, and it is hoped that such a work will be ultimately performed. Should this translation be regarded as final by students, or at least as a satisfactory foundation for a full and complete comprehension of the Sage of Hohenheim, And should the encouragement which is indispensable to an undertaking so long and costly be adequately given, it is proposed, after a reasonable interval, that these 2 volumes of uncriticized text should be followed by one other, which will contain all the materials requisite for understanding Paracelsus, and will further trace, methodically and historically, the development of alchemical symbolism, with the growth of chemical knowledge from the Byzantine period to the dawn of the Reformation. It is anticipated that this inquiry will fix for the first time the true objects of Hermetic physics, and the place which must be assigned to Paracelsus in connection therewith. The less ambitious but indispensable preliminary of this inquiry has been alone attempted here, and the simple provision of a text, as intelligible as the circumstances will allow, has been truly no light undertaking, nor should it be regarded as the exclusive work of one hand. The editor has accomplished his task with the collaboration of other specialists and is responsible only for certain portions of the actual translation and for its general revision and collation. The work as it stands consists of A, the large body of literature, entire and unabridged, attributed to Paracelsus and treating directly of alchemy, and the transcendental doctrines and physics of the magnum opus. B, the whole Paracelsian literature of the great elixir and the universal medicine. C, so much of the Hermetic philosophy and cosmogony of Paracelsus as has been judged necessary to illustrate his alchemical teachings. D, one important treatise illustrating the application by Paracelsus of metallic and mineral substances to the treatment of diseases. E, an exhaustive collection of alchemical references scattered through the chirurgical works of Paracelsus. Thus, the present edition is practically inclusive of everything except the exoteric medicine of Paracelsus, which it is thought is of inferior importance to the modern student. The Coelum Philosophorum, or Book of Vexations, by Philippus Theophrastus Paracelsus. The science and nature of alchemy and what opinion should be formed thereof. Regulated by the 7 rules or fundamental canons according to the 7 commonly known metals, and containing a preface with certain treatises, and appendices. The Preface of Theophrastus Paracelsus to all chemists and readers of this book. You who are skilled in alchemy, and as many others as promise yourselves great riches or chiefly desire to make gold and silver, which alchemy in different ways promises and teaches equally too. You who willingly undergo toil and vexations, and wish not to be freed from them, until you have attained your rewards and the fulfillment of the promises made to you. Experience teaches this every day, that out of thousands of you not even one accomplishes his desire. Is this a failure of nature or of art? I say no, but it is rather the fault of fate or of the unskillfulness of the operator. Since therefore the characters of the signs of the stars and planets of heaven, together with the other names, inverted words, receipts, materials, and instruments are thoroughly well known to such as are acquainted with this art, it would be altogether superfluous to recur to these same subjects in the present book, although the use of such signs, names, and characters at the proper time is by no means without advantage. But herein will be noticed another way of treating alchemy different from the previous method, and deduced by 7 canons from the 7-fold series of the metals. This indeed will not give scope for a pompous parade of words, but nevertheless, in the consideration of those canons, everything which should be separated from alchemy will be treated at sufficient length, and, moreover, many secrets of other things are herein contained. Hence, too, result certain marvelous speculations and new operations, which frequently differ from the writings and opinions of ancient operators and natural philosophers, but have been discovered and confirmed by full proof and experimentation. Moreover, in this art nothing is more true than this, though it be little known and gain small confidence. All the fault and cause of difficulty in alchemy, whereby very many persons are reduced to poverty and others labor in vain, is wholly and solely lack of skill in the operator. And the defect or excess of materials, whether in quantity or quality, whence it ensues that, in the course of operation, things are wasted or reduced to nothing. If the true process shall have been found, the substance itself, while transmuting, approaches daily more and more towards perfection. The straight road is easy, but it is found by very few. Sometimes it may happen that a speculative artist may, by his own eccentricity, think out for himself some new method in alchemy, be the consequence anything or nothing. He need do not in order to reduce something into nothing, and again bring back something out of nothing. Yet this proverb of the incredulous is not wholly false. Destruction perfects that which is good, for the good cannot appear on account of that which conceals it. The good is least good whilst it is thus concealed. The concealment must be removed that so the good may be able freely to appear in its own brightness. For example, the mountain, the sand, the earth, or the stone in which a metal has grown is such a concealment. Each one of the visible metals is a concealment of the other 6 metals. By the element of fire, all that is imperfect is destroyed and taken away, as, for instance, the 5 metals, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Saturn. On the other hand, the perfect metals, Sol and Luna, are not consumed in that same fire. They remain in the fire, and at the same time, out of the other imperfect ones which are destroyed, they assume their own body and become visible to the eyes. How and by what method this comes about can be gathered from the 7 canons. Hence it may be learnt what are the nature and property of each metal, what it affects with the other metals, and what are its powers in commixture with them. But this should be noted in the very first place, that these 7 canons cannot be perfectly understood by every cursory reader at a first glance or a single reading. An inferior intelligence does not easily perceive occult and abstruse subjects. Each one of these canons demands no slight discussion. Many persons, puffed up with pride, fancy they can easily comprehend all which this book comprises. Thus they set down its contents as useless and futile, thinking they have something far better of their own, and that therefore they can afford to despise what is here contained. The Coelum Philosophorum, Part 1, 7 Canons of the Metals. The First Canon. Concerning the nature and properties of Mercury, all things are concealed in all. One of them all is the concealer of the rest, their corporeal vessel, external, visible, and movable. All liquefactions are manifested in that vessel. For the vessel is a living and corporeal spirit, and so all coagulations or congelations enclosed in it, when prevented from flowing and surrounded, are not there with content. No name can be found for this liquefaction by which it may be designated, still less can it be found for its origin. And since no heat is so strong as to be equalized therewith, it should be compared to the fire of Gehenna. A liquefaction of this kind has no sort of connection with others made by the heat of natural fire, or congealed or coagulated by natural cold. These congelations, through their weakness, are unable to obtain in Mercury, and therefore, on that account, he altogether contemns them. Hence one may gather that elementary powers, in their process of destruction, can add nothing to, nor take away anything from, celestial powers, which are called quintessence, or its elements, nor have they any capacity for operating. Celestial and infernal powers do not obey the 4 elements, whether they be dry, moist, hot, or cold. No one of them has the faculty of acting against a quintessence, but each one contains within itself its own powers and means of action. The Second Canon, concerning the nature and properties of Jupiter, in that which is manifest, that is to say, the body of Jupiter. The other 6 corporeal metals are spiritually concealed, but one more deeply and more tenaciously than another. Jupiter has nothing of a quintessence in his composition, but is of the nature of the 4 elementaries. On this account, his liquefaction is brought about by the application of a moderate fire, and, in like manner, he is coagulated by moderate cold. He has affinity with the liquefactions of all the other metals, for the more like he is to some other nature, the more easily he is united thereto by conjunction. For the operation of those nearly allied is easier and more natural than of those which are remote. The remote body does not press upon the other. At the same time, it is not feared, though it may be very powerful. Hence it happens that men do not aspire to the superior orders of creation, because they are far distant from them and do not see their glory. In like manner, they do not much fear those of an inferior order, because they are remote, and none of the living knows their condition or has experienced the misery of their punishment. For this cause an infernal spirit is accounted as nothing. For more remote objects are on that account held more cheaply and occupy a lower place, since according to the propriety of its position each object turns out better or is transmuted. This can be proved by various examples. The more remote, therefore, Jupiter is found to be from Mars and Venus, and the nearer Sol and Luna, the more goldness or silveriness, if I may so say, it contains in its body, and the greater, stronger, more visible, more tangible, more amiable, more acceptable, more distinguished, and more true it is found than in some remote body. Again, the more remote a thing is, of the less account is it esteemed in all the respects aforesaid, since what is present is always preferred before what is absent. In proportion as the nearer is clear, the more remote is occult. This, therefore, is a point which you, as an alchemist, must seriously debate with yourself. How you can relegate Jupiter to a remote and abstruse place which Sol and Luna occupy, and how, in turn, you can summon Sol and Luna from remote positions to a near place, where Jupiter is corporeally posited, so that in the same way Sol and Luna also may really be present there corporeally before your eyes. For the transmutation of metals from imperfection to perfection, there are several practical receipts. Mix the one with the other, then again separate the one pure from the other, This is nothing else but the process of permutation set in order by perfect alchemical labor. Note that Jupiter has much gold and not a little silver. Let Saturn and Luna be imposed on him, and of the rest Luna will be augmented. The Third Canon, concerning Mars and its properties. The 6 occult metals have expelled the 7th from them and have made it corporeal, leaving it little efficacy and imposing on it great hardness and weight. This being the case, they have shaken off all their own strength of coagulation and hardness, which they manifest in this other body. On the contrary, they have retained in themselves their color and liquefaction, together with their nobility. It is very difficult and laborious for a prince or a king to be produced out of an unfit and common man, but Mars acquires dominion with strong and pugnacious hand, and seizes on the position of king. He should, however, be on his guard against snares, that he be not led captive suddenly and unexpectedly. It must also be considered by what method Mars may be able to take the place of king, and Sol and Luna, with Saturn, hold the place of Mars. The Fourth Canon, concerning Venus and its properties. The other 6 metals have rendered Venus an extrinsical body by means of all their color and method of liquefaction. It may be necessary, in order to understand this, that we should show by some examples how a manifest thing may be rendered occult, and an occult thing rendered materially manifest by means of fire. Whatever is combustible can be naturally transmuted by fire from one form into another, namely into lime, soot, ashes, glass, color, stones, and earth. This last can again be reduced to many new metallic bodies. If a metal too be burnt or rendered fragile by old rust, it can again acquire malleability by applications of fire. The Fifth Canon, concerning the nature and properties of Saturn. Of his own nature, Saturn speaks thus: the other 6 have cast me out as their examiner. They have thrust me forth from them and from a spiritual place. They have also added a corruptible body as a place of abode, so that I may be what they neither are nor desire to become. My 6 brothers are spiritual, and thence it ensues that so often as I am put in the fire, they penetrate my body, and together with me perish in the fire, Sol and Luna. Accepted. These are purified and ennobled in my water. My spirit is a water, softening the rigid and congealed bodies of my brothers. Yet my body is inclined to the earth. Whatever is received into me becomes conformed thereto, and by means of us is converted into one body. It would be of little use to the world if it should learn, or at least believe, what lies hid in me and what I am able to effect. It would be more profitable it should ascertain what I am able to do with myself. Deserting all the methods of the alchemists, it would then use only that which is in me and can be done by me. The stone of cold is in me. This is a water by means of which I make the spirits of the 6 metals congeal into the essence of the 7th, and this is to promote Sol with Luna. 2 kinds of antimony are found. One, the common black, by which Sol is purified when liquefied therein. This has the closest affinity with Saturn. The other kind is the white, which is also called magnesia and bismuth. It has great affinity with Jupiter, and when mixed with the other antimony, it augments Luna. The Sixth Canon, concerning Luna and the properties thereof. The endeavor to make Saturn or Mars out of Luna involves no lighter or easier work than to make Luna with great gain out of Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, or Saturn. It is not useful to transmute what is perfect into what is imperfect, but the latter into the former. Nevertheless, it is well to know what is the material of Luna, or whence it proceeds. Whoever is not able to consider or find this out will never be able to make Luna. It will be asked, what is Luna? It is among the 7 metals which are spiritually concealed, itself the 7th, external, corporeal, and material. For the 7th always contains the 6 metals spiritually hidden in itself. And the 6 spiritual metals do not exist without one external and material metal. So also no corporeal metal can have place or essence without those 6 spiritual ones. The 7 corporeal metals mix easily by means of liquefaction, but this mixture is not useful for making Sol or Luna. For in that mixture each metal remains in its own nature, or fixed in the fire, or flies from it. For example, mix, in any way you can, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Sol, and Luna. It will not thence result that Sol and Luna will so change the other 5, that by the agency of Sol and Luna, these will become Sol and Luna. For though all be liquefied into a single mass, nevertheless each remains in its nature whatever it is. This is the judgment which must be passed on corporeal mixture. But concerning spiritual mixture and communion of the metals, it should be known that no separation or mortification is spiritual, because such spirits can never exist without bodies. Though the body should be taken away from them and mortified 100 times in 1 hour, nevertheless, they would always acquire another much more noble than the former. And this is the transposition of the metals from one death to another, that is to say, from a lesser degree into one greater and higher, namely into Luna, and from a better into the best and most perfect, that is, into Sol, the brilliant and altogether royal metal. It is most true, then, as frequently said above, that the six metals always generate a seventh, or produce it from themselves clear in its esse. A question may arise. If it be true that Luna and every metal derives its origin and is generated from the other six, what is then its property and its nature? To this we reply, from Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Sol, nothing and no other metal than Luna could be made. The cause is that each metal has two good virtues of the other six, of which altogether there are 12. These are the spirit of Luna, which thus in a few words may be made known. Luna is composed of the six spiritual metals and their virtues, whereof each possesses two. Altogether, therefore, 12 are thus posited in one corporeal metal, which are compared to the 7 planets and the 12 celestial signs. Luna has from the planet Mercury, and from Aquarius and Pisces, its liquidity and bright white color. Mercury, Aquarius, and Pisces. So Luna has from Jupiter with Sagittarius and Taurus, its white color and its great firmness and fire. Jupiter, Sagittarius, Taurus. Luna has from Mars with Cancer and Aries, its hardness and its clear sound. Mars, Cancer, Aries. Luna has from Venus with Gemini and Libra, its measure of coagulation and its malleability. Venus, Gemini, Libra. From Saturn with Virgo and Scorpio, its homogeneous body with gravity. Saturn, Virgo, Scorpio. From Sol with Leo and Virgo, its spotless purity and great constancy against the power of fire. Sol, Leo, Virgo. Such is the knowledge of the natural exaltation and of the course of the spirit and body of Luna, with its composite nature and wisdom briefly summarized. Furthermore, it should be pointed out what kind of a body such metallic spirits acquire in their primitive generation by means of celestial influx. For the metal digger, when he has crushed the stone, contemptible as it is in appearance, liquefies it, corrupts it, and altogether mortifies it with fire. Then this metallic spirit, in such a process of mortification, receives a better and more noble body, not friable but malleable. Then comes the alchemist, who again corrupts, mortifies, and artificially prepares such a metallic body. Thus once more that spirit of the metal assumes a more noble and more perfect body, putting itself forward clearly into the light, except it be Sol or Luna. Then at last the metallic spirit and body are perfectly united, are safe from the corruption of elementary fire, and also incorruptible. Furthermore, it should be pointed out what kind of a body such metallic spirits acquire in their primitive generation by means of celestial influx. For the metal digger, when he has crushed the stone, contemptible as it is in appearance, liquefies it, corrupts it, and altogether mortifies it with fire. Then this metallic spirit, in such a process of mortification, receives a better and more noble body, not friable but malleable. Then comes the alchemist, who again corrupts, mortifies, and artificially prepares such a metallic body. Thus once more that spirit of the metal assumes a more noble and more perfect body, putting itself forward clearly into the light, except it be Sol or Luna. Then at last the metallic spirit and body are perfectly united, are safe from the corruption of elementary fire, and also incorruptible. When the three prime principles have been purged of their superfluities, and from the said superfluities the imperfect metals have been generated, there remains nothing gross or crude, either in color or substance, but only a very subtle nature of a white and purple hue. This is the most pure quality of mercury, salt, and sulfur, most clear and excellent in form, substance, essence, and color. These two essences, namely the white and the purple, are separated by the archeus, and out of the first, fixed and coagulated, is formed silver, while from the purple there is generated gold, which is the most noble sulfur, salt, and mercury, separated from all other colors and consisting of purple alone. Its clay or yellow appearance is accounted for by the subtlety and clearness of the metal, because all the dull colors are removed. In silver, the most prevalent colors are green and blue, which are respectively derived from the mercury and the salt, the sulfur contributing nothing in the matter of coloring. On the other hand, in gold, the purple color is derived from salt, the pellucid redness from sulfur, and the yellow from mercury. Ibid. C8. The Seventh Canon, concerning the nature of soul and its properties. The seventh after the six spiritual metals is corporeally soul, which in itself is nothing but pure fire. What in outward appearance is more beautiful, more brilliant, more clear and perceptible, a heavier, colder, or more homogeneous body to see? And it is easy to perceive the cause of this, namely, that it contains in itself the congealations of the other six metals, out of which it is made externally into one most compact body. Its liquefaction proceeds from elementary fire, or is caused by the liquations of Mercury, with Pisces and Aquarius concealed spiritually within it. The most manifest proof of this is that Mercury is easily mingled corporeally with the sun as in an embrace. But for soul, when the heat is withdrawn and the cold supervenes after liquefaction to coagulate and to become hard and solid, there is need of the other 5 metals, whose nature it embraces in itself: Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Luna. In these 5 metals, the cold abodes with their regiments are especially found. Hence it happens that soul can with difficulty be liquefied without the heat of fire, on account of the cold whereof mention has been made. For Mercury cannot assist with his natural heat or liquefaction, or defend himself against the cold of the 5 metals, because the heat of Mercury is not sufficient to retain soul in a state of liquefaction. Wherefore soul has to obey the 5 metals rather than Mercury alone. Mercury itself has no office of itself save always to flow. Hence it happens that in coagulations of the other metals, it can effect nothing, since its nature is not to make anything hard or solid, but liquid. To render fluid is the nature of heat and life, but cold has the nature of hardness, consolidation, and immobility, which is compared to death. For example, the 6 cold metals, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mars, Venus, Luna, if they are to be liquefied, must be brought to that condition by the heat of fire. Snow or ice, which are cold, will not produce this effect, but rather will harden. As soon as ever the metal liquefied by fire is removed therefrom, the cold, seizing upon it, renders it hard, congelated, and immovable of itself. But in order that Mercury may remain fluid and alive continually, say, I pray you, whether this will be affected with heat or cold. Whoever answers that this is brought about by a cold and damp nature, and that it has its life from cold, the promulgator of this opinion, having no knowledge of nature, is led away by the vulgar. For the vulgar man judges only falsely, and always holds firmly onto his error. So then let him who loves truth withdraw therefrom. Mercury, in fact, lives not at all from cold, but from a warm and fiery nature. Whatever lives is fire, because heat is life, but cold the occasion of death. The fire of Sol is of itself pure, not indeed alive, but hard, and so far shews the color of sulfur, and that yellow and red are mixed therein in due proportion. The 5 cold metals are Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Venus, and Luna, which assign to Sol their virtues, according to cold, the body itself, according to fire, color, according to dryness, solidity, according to humidity, weight, and out of brightness, sound. But that gold is not burned in the element of terrestrial fire, nor is even corrupted, is affected by the firmness of soul. For one fire cannot burn another, or even consume it, but rather if fire be added to fire, it is increased, and becomes more powerful in its operations. The celestial fire which flows to us on the earth from the sun is not such a fire as there is in heaven, neither is it like that which exists upon the earth, but that celestial fire with us is cold and congealed, and it is the body of the sun. Wherefore the sun can in no way be overcome by our fire. This only happens, that it is liquefied, like snow or ice, by that same celestial sun. Fire, therefore, has not the power of burning fire, because the sun is fire, which dissolved in heaven is coagulated with us. Gold is in its essence threefold: celestial, elemental, and metallic, and is dissolved, fluid, and corporeal. End of the 7 Canons. Part 2 of the Coelum Philosophorum of Paracelsus. Certain treatises and appendices arising out of the 7 Canons. God and nature do nothing in vain. The eternal position of all things, independent of time, without beginning or end, operates everywhere. It works essentially where otherwise there is no hope. It accomplishes that which is deemed impossible. What appears beyond belief or hope emerges into truth after a wonderful fashion. Note on Mercurius vivus, that is the living Mercury. Whatever tinges with a white color has the nature of life, and the properties and power of light, which causally produces life. Whatever, on the other hand, tinges with blackness, or produces black, has a nature in common with death, the properties of darkness, and forces productive of death. The earth with its frigidity is a coagulation and fixation of this kind of hardness. For the house is always dead, but he who inhabits the house lives. If you can discover the force of this illustration, you have conquered. Tested liquefactive powder. Burn fat verbena. That is, burn rich vervain and male frankincense, mentioned in Virgil, Eclog 8, line 65. Recipe: salt niter, 4 ounces. A moiety of sulfur, tartar, 1 ounce. Mix and liquefy. What is to be thought concerning the congelation of mercury? To mortify or congeal mercury, and afterwards seek to turn it into Luna, and to sublimate it with great labor, is labor in vain, since it involves a dissipation of soul and Luna existing therein. There is another method, far different and much more concise, whereby, with little waste of mercury and less expenditure of toil, it is transmuted into luna without congelation. Anyone can at pleasure learn this art in alchemy, since it is so simple and easy, and by it, in a short time, he can make any quantity of silver and gold. It is tedious to read long descriptions, and everybody wishes to be advised in straightforward words. Do this then, proceed as follows, and you will have soul and luna, by help whereof you will turn out a very rich man. Wait a while, I beg, while this process is described to you in few words, and keep these words well digested, so that out of Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter you may make soul and luna. There is not, nor ever will be, any art so easy to find out in practice and so effective in itself. The method of making soul and luna by alchemy is so prompt that there is no more need of books or of elaborate instruction than there would be if one wished to write about last year's snow. Concerning the receipts of alchemy, what then shall we say about the receipts of alchemy and about the diversity of its vessels and instruments? These are furnaces, glasses, jars, waters, oils, limes, sulfurs, salts, saltpeters, alums, vitriols, chrysocol, copper greens, atraments, ori pigments, fel vitri, ceruse, red earth, thusia, wax, lutum sapientiae, pounded glass, verdigris, soot, tiste ovorum, crocus of Mars, soap, crystal, chalk, arsenic, antimony, minium elixir, lasurium, gold leaf, salt nitre, sal ammoniac, calamine stone, magnesia, bolus arminus, and many other things. Moreover, concerning preparations, putrefactions, digestions, probations, solutions, cementings, filtrations, reverberations, calcinations, graduations, rectifications, amalgamations, purgations, etc., with these alchemical books are crammed. Then, again, concerning herbs, roots, seeds, woods, stones, animals, worms, bone dust, snail shells, other shells, and pitch. These and the like, whereof there are some very far-fetched in alchemy, are mere encumbrances of work, since even if soul and luna could be made by them, they rather hinder and delay than further one's purpose. But it is not from these, to say the truth, that the art of making soul and luna is to be learnt. So then, all these things should be passed by, because they have no effect with the five metals so far as soul and luna are concerned. Someone may ask, what then is this short and easy way, which involves no difficulty, and yet whereby soul and luna can be made? Our answer is, this has been fully and openly explained in the seven canons. It would be lost labor should one seek further to instruct one who does not understand these. It would be impossible to convince such a person that these matters could be so easily understood, but in an occult rather than in an open sense. The art is this: after you have made heaven, or the sphere of Saturn, with its life to run over the earth, place on it all the planets, or such, one or more as you wish, so that the portion of Luna may be the smallest. Let all run until heaven, or Saturn, has entirely disappeared. Then all those planets will remain dead with their old corruptible bodies, having meanwhile obtained their new, perfect, and incorruptible body. That body is the spirit of heaven. From it, these planets again receive a body and life, and live as before. Take this body from the life and the earth. Keep it. It is soul and luna. Here you have the art altogether clear and entire. If you do not yet understand it, or are not practiced therein, it is well. It is better that it should be kept concealed, and not made public. How to conjure the crystal, so that all things may be seen in it. To conjure is nothing else than to observe anything rightly, to know and to understand what it is. The crystal is a figure of the air. Whatever appears in the air, movable or immovable, the same appears also in the speculum or crystal as a wave. For the air, the water, and the crystal, so far as vision is concerned, are one, like a mirror in which an inverted copy of an object is seen. Concerning the heat of Mercury, those who think that Mercury is of a moist and cold nature are plainly in error, because it is by its nature in the highest degree warm and moist, which is the cause of its being in a constant state of fluidity. If it were of a moist and cold nature, it would have the appearance of frozen water and be always hard and solid, so that it would be necessary to liquefy it by the heat of fire, as in the case of the other metals. But it does not require this, since it has liquidity and flux from its own heat naturally inborn in it, which keeps it in a state of perpetual fluidity and renders it quick, so that it can neither die, nor be coagulated, nor congealed. And this is well worth noticing, that the spirits of the seven metals, or as many of them as have been commingled as soon as they come into the fire, contend with one another, especially Mercury, so that each may put forth its powers and virtues in the endeavor to get the mastery in the way of liquefying and transmuting. One seizes on the virtue, life, and form of another, and assigns some other nature and form to this one. So then the spirits or vapors of the metals are stirred up by the heat to operate mutually one upon the other, and transmute from one virtue to another until perfection and purity are attained. But what must be done besides to mercury in order that its moisture and heat may be taken away, and in their place such an extreme cold introduced as to congeal, consolidate, and altogether mortify the mercury? Do what follows in the sentence subjoined. Take pure mercury closely shut up in a silver pyxis. Fill a jar with fragments of lead, in the midst of which place the pyxis. Let it melt for 24 hours, that is, for a natural day. This takes away from mercury as a cold heat, adds an external heat, and contributes the internal coldness of Saturn and Luna, which are both planets of a cold nature, whence and whereby the mercury is compelled to congeal, consolidate, and harden. Note also that the coldness, which mercury needs in its consolidation and mortification, is not perceptible by the external sense as the cold of snow or of ice is, but rather externally. There is a certain amount of apparent heat. Just in the same way is it with the heat of mercury, which is the cause of its fluidity. It is not external heat, but perceptible in the same way as one of our qualities. Nay, externally a sort of coldness is perceptible. Whence the sophists, a race which has more talk than true wisdom, falsely assert that mercury is cold and of a moist nature, so that they go on and advise us to congeal it by means of heat, whereas heat only renders it more fluid, as they daily find out to their own loss, rather than gain. True alchemy, which alone, by its unique art, teaches how to fabricate Sol and Luna from the 5 imperfect metals, allows no other receipt than this, which well and truly says. Only from metals, in metals by metals, and with metals, are perfect metals made, for in some things is Luna, and in other metals is Sol. What materials and instruments are required in alchemy? There is need of nothing else but a foundry, bellows, tongs, hammers, cauldrons, jars, and cupels made from beech and ashes. Afterwards lay on Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, Venus, Mercury, and Luna. Let them operate finally up to Saturn, the method of seeking minerals. The hope of finding these in the earth and in stones is most uncertain, and the labor very great. However, since this is the first mode of getting them, it is in no way to be despised, but greatly commended. Such a desire or appetite ought no more to be done away with than the lawful inclination of young people, and those in the prime of life, to matrimony. As the bees long for roses and other flowers for the purpose of making honey and wax, so too, men, apart from avarice or their own aggrandizement, should seek to extract metal from the earth. He who does not seek it is not likely to find it. God dowers men not only with gold or silver, but also with poverty, squalor, and misery. He has given to some a singular knowledge of metals and minerals, whereby they have obtained an easier and shorter method of fabricating gold and silver without digging and smelting them than they were commonly accustomed to by extracting them from their primitive bodies. And this is the case not only with subterranean substances, but by certain arts and knowledge, they have extracted them from the 5 metals generally, that is to say, from metals extracted from minerals which are imperfect and called metals, viz., from Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, and Venus, from all of which, and from each of them separately, Sol and Luna can be made, but from one more easily than from another. Note that Sol and Luna can be made easily from Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter, but from Mars and Venus with difficulty. It is possible to make them, however, but with the addition of Sol and Luna. Out of magnesium and Saturn comes Luna, and out of Jupiter and cinnabar pure Sol takes its rise. The skillful artist, however, how well I remember, will be able by diligent consideration to prepare metals so that, led by a true method of reasoning, he can promote the perfection of metallic transformation more than do the courses of the 12 signs and the 7 planets. In such matters, it is quite superfluous to watch these courses, as also their aspects, good or bad days or hours, the prosperous or unlucky condition of this or that planet, for these matters can do no good, and much less can they do harm in the art of natural alchemy. If otherwise, and you have a feasible process, operate when you please. If, however, there be anything wanting in you or your mode of working or your understanding, the planets and the stars of heaven will fail you in your work. If metals remain buried long enough in the earth, not only are they consumed by rust, but by long continuance, they are even transmuted into natural stones. And there are a great many of these, but this is known to few. For there is found in the earth old stone money of the heathens, printed with their different figures. These coins were originally metallic, but through the transmutation brought about by nature, they were turned into stone. What alchemy is? Alchemy is nothing else but the set purpose, intention, and subtle endeavor to transmute the kinds of the metals from one to another. According to this, each person, by his own mental grasp, can choose out for himself a better way in art, and therein find truth. For the man who follows a thing up more intently does find the truth. It is highly necessary to have a correct estimation of stars and of stones, because the star is the informing spirit of all stones. For the Sol and Luna of all the celestial stars are nothing but one stone in itself, and the terrestrial stone has come forth from the celestial stone, through the same fire, coals, ashes, the same expulsions and repurgations as that celestial stone. It has been separated and brought clear and pure in its brightness. The whole ball of the earth is only something thrown off, concrete, mixed, corrupted, ground, and again coagulated, and gradually liquefied into one mass, into a stony work, which has its seat and its rest in the midst of the firmamental sphere. Further, it is to be remarked that those precious stones which shall forthwith be set down have the nearest place to the heavenly or sidereal ones in point of perfection, purity, beauty, brightness, virtue, power of withstanding fire and incorruptibility, and they have been fixed with other stones in the earth. They have, therefore, the greatest affinity with heavenly stones and with the stars, because their natures are derived from these. They are found by the stars, because their natures are derived from these. They are found by men in a rude environment, and the common herd, whose property it is to take false views of things, believe that they were produced in the same place where they are found, and that they were afterwards polished, carried around, and sold and accounted to be great riches on account of their colors, beauty, and other virtues. A brief description of them follows. The emerald. This is a green transparent stone. It does good to the eyes and the memory. It defends chastity, and if this be violated by him who carries it, the stone itself does not remain perfect. The adamant. A black crystal called adamant or else evax, on account of the joy which it is effectual in impressing on those who carry it. It is of an obscure and transparent blackness, the color of iron. It is the hardest of all, but is dissolved in the blood of a goat. Its size at the largest does not exceed that of a hazelnut. The magnet is an iron stone, and so attracts iron to itself. The pearl. The pearl is not a stone, because it is produced in seashells. It is of a white color. Seeing that it grows in animated beings, in men, or in fishes, it is not properly of a stony nature, but properly a depraved, otherwise a transmuted nature supervening upon a perfect work. The jacinth is a yellow, transparent stone. There's a flower of the same name, which, according to the fable of the poets, is said to have been a man. The sapphire is a stone of a celestial color and a heavenly nature. The ruby shines with intensely red nature. The carbuncle, a solar stone, shining by its own nature like the sun. The coral is a white or red stone, not transparent. It grows in the sea, out of the nature of the water and the air, into the form of wood or a shrub. It hardens in the air, and is not capable of being destroyed in fire. The chalcedony is a stone made up of different colors, occupying a middle place between obscurity and transparency, mixed also with cloudiness and liver-colored. It is the lowest of all the precious stones. The topaz is a stone shining by night. It is found among rocks. The amethyst is a stone of a purple and blood color. The chrysoprasus is a stone which appears like fire by night and like gold by day. The crystal is a white stone, transparent, and very like ice. It is sublimated, extracted, and produced from other stones. As a pledge and firm foundation of this matter, note the following conclusion. If anyone intelligently and reasonably takes care to exercise himself in learning about the metals, what they are, and whence they are produced, he may know that our metals are nothing else than the best part and the spirit of common stones, that is pitch, grease, fat, oil, and stone. But this is least pure, uncontaminated, and perfect, so long as it remains hidden or mixed with the stones. It should therefore be sought and found in the stones, be recognized in them, and extracted from them, that is, forcibly drawn out and liquefied. For then it is no longer a stone, but an elaborate and perfect metal, comparable to the stars of heaven, which are themselves, as it were, stones separated from those of earth. Whoever, therefore, studies minerals and metals must be furnished with such reason and intelligence that he shall not regard only those common and known metals which are found in the depth of the mountains alone. For there is often found at the very surface of the earth such a metal as is not met with at all, or not equally good in the depths. And so every stone which comes to our view, be it great or small, flint or simple rock, should be carefully investigated and weighed with a true balance according to its nature and properties. Very often a common stone thrown away and despised is worth more than a cow. Regard must not always be had to the place of digging from which this stone came forth, for here the influence of the sky prevails. Everywhere there is presented to us earth or dust or sand which often contain much metal or silver, and this you will mark. Here ends the Coelum Philosophorum of Paracelsus.